On today's show, we'll be joined by weekly co-host Alykhan Bijani to react to and discuss the John Wall tell-all interview about his time with the Houston Rockets. John Wall sharing his thoughts on what it was like being asked to sit out for an entire year, his veteran mentorship of Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. trying to help them understand that the situation here in Houston would not fly with a lot of other organizations, talking about the logistics behind him having to sit out and the fact that Stephen Silas may have not been on board with that plan whatsoever. What does this tell us about the Houston Rockets organization? What does it tell us about the front office and how the Rockets have handled this situation and how they're handling the rebuild so far? We're going to tackle all of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. And the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can help us out tremendously by commenting anything below. But for today's episode, tell us your thoughts on the John Wall interview. Was John Wall wrong in what he said? Was he right? How do you feel about what John Wall said about the Houston Rockets? Let me know in the YouTube comments. I read each and every one of those every day. But as always, appreciate you for making LOR part of your day, whether you're listening on the way to work, whether you're on lunch break, whether you're at the gym. Thank you for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, the X's and O's man himself, Alykhan Bijani. You can follow on Twitter at Rockets_insider. And man, do we have a doozy of an episode for you here today with John Wall deciding to air out the dirty laundry of the Houston Rockets organization, so to speak, choosing to sit down in podcast format, being asked about his time with the Houston Rockets organization and some of his takeaways. And he had some, Alykhan, some pretty damning things to say about the Rockets. Is there anything that you want to preface before because we've got a couple clips here of the kind of taken out of the full-length interview. He talked about his time first getting to Houston, dealing with the whole James Harden saga, and then, trying to impart advice onto the young guys, and then the whole situation of being asked to sit out for the entire year. So we're going to dive into all of this, but do you have any thoughts that you want to preface these clips with?
I just want to start off with the quote that Rafael Stone gave on July 30, 2021. This is Rafael Stone saying, quote, "The way you build a really good culture and chemistry is you have fun along the way," unquote. And
oh my.
I don't think after hearing what John Wall had to say, Rockets fans will be having a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, these were some pretty choice words from John Wall about this situation. Let's start with our first one. John Wall talking about Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green and kind of trying to impart some advice onto them about just the situation that they're in here in Houston.
How did you, because you the vet at that time.
So I was just like, I was just being a professional.
Yeah.
Like I always wanted to teach them, like, don't get used to this. It's not how the NBA is.
Right.
Like, it's just a bad organization right now. Like, they got to fix around. But like I always talked to Jalen Green, Kevin Porter, KJ. I'm like, yo, don't get adjusted to this loser. It's not how the league is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I had to tell them, like, this y'all getting away with over here, you go to any other teams, you be out the league. Like, you wouldn't play.
You're not playing.
I wouldn't play.
No facts.
So I'm trying to explain that to them because they think it's sweet. And I'm like, if you ever get traded and go somewhere else, you can be like, this was right.
Wow. So a lot to unpack from that, and that is the easier of the two clips that we have for you here on today's show. Alykhan, first let's start with, John Wall just outwardly, that's a bad organization, right? Like that bad organization, they've got a lot to figure out, right? I'm not going to use the explicatives that John Wall decided to use, but just going out outright saying they've got a lot to figure out. But then, piggybacking on saying, explaining to Jalen, Kevin, KJ, trying to get them to understand that the situation that they're in right now, the way that they play, the way that they are possibly encouraged to play right now, the lack of accountability, whatever, they wouldn't play for other teams, right? They'd be out of the league, whatever. And these are words coming from John Wall's mouth, right? This isn't a podcaster. This isn't a journalist or a beat reporter saying, this is an NBA player who was part of this organization recently, right? And he's saying that there are serious problems here in Houston. This is not a great look, man.
There's a couple things to this. First thing is you have a player who's played for an organization after James Harden was traded, was here when you drafted your number 2 overall pick and you brought in 4 rookies. He was in the building. And John Wall later talks about, and we'll get into that, what happened about him not playing his second season here. But he was here. He was in the building. He was in Houston when those rookies were here. He went to Vegas when those rookies were playing in the summer league. So he was around those guys. And I don't think he's saying something that we already didn't know. Fact of the matter is, Jackson, I think you can see it. When a defender, I'm saying defender because I'm focusing on defense right now. When a defender messes up a defensive possession multiple times in a row, what is usually what is an NBA coach going to do? He's going to take him out the game, Jackson. Am I right?
Usually.
Yeah, usually. And in this case, when Jalen is just getting twisted and turned as a pedestal on defense, when you're not getting back in transition because you are the worst transition defense team in the NBA, when you're doing things multiple possessions in a row, there tend to be consequences when you play for other teams, no matter what your status is or who you are. That does not seem to exist here in Houston. You can say it's youth, but how long are you going to say it's youth when it's the same players making the same mistakes and not being held accountable? And I think that just goes along with what John Wall was saying here, right? He said the unspoken thing out loud, and it's a bad look. It is a very bad look.
And I think, this is tough because I think John Wall is in a position where I think some people could make the argument that, well, John Wall clearly has an axe to grind, against the Rockets organization, unhappy about how they treated him, whatever. Like, he doesn't, again, what benefit does this get for John Wall? Like, this doesn't help him at all. If anything, this is him just, from my understanding with John Wall, he's just been a guy who routinely just calls it out how it is, right? He tells the truth, calls it how it is, and is candidly, for better or for worse, himself, right? He's opened up before about his mental health struggles. He's been very transparent about the stuff that he's been dealing with off the court. And this, to me, is maybe the most candid upfront look or commentary on the Rockets organization that we've gotten to this point about what exactly is going on here in Houston, right? Because now you hear John Wall's criticisms, right? But this is coming off the heels of criticism from De'Aaron Fox, talking about the way that the Rockets play. They're ISO heavy. They're not going to do this, that, and the other thing. Like, some really disparaging comments from De'Aaron Fox ahead of the back-to-back slate of games against the Kings. Then you have Austin Rivers, who goes on his podcast, or a podcast, talking about the way the highlight culture of the NBA, like the AAU style of play and all this, and it very much felt like this came off the heels of him playing against the Houston Rockets and Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green, and talking about they need somebody to steer them in the right direction, right? Comments from Austin Rivers. It's hard not to imagine that those comments weren't, prompted by playing the Rockets and seeing the style of play that they have, and the fact that there is very little, organizational direction, leadership, accountability, whatever you want to call it. It's just John Wall is sitting here calling this stuff out, and I respect the hell out of him for doing it.
It's about the bad habits, and this is something that you and I have talked about, Jackson, numerous times, right? Bad habits being formed. And I think you can still, nobody's faulting the Rockets for wanting to develop Kevin Porter Jr. as a point guard. And in fact, I think that was the right move. And we talked about it. I still think it was the right move because he was your only asset at the point guard position at that point. You want to give him a shot to play well and grow into the role and see if he can be your point guard of the future. right? You made a decision and you live with it. Now, what has that caused? That's caused the Rockets to consistently be in the lottery, right? Because it hasn't worked out necessarily to the point you have to make. It's still, I still think there's time. Kevin Porter Jr. will come back here in a few games. Let's see how he plays well with Sengun establishing himself as the offensive hub and go from there. But, you chose, the front office chose to have Kevin Porter Jr. given the keys to run the offense. But even if that's the case, and all that is going on, to establish a culture, you have to have everybody accountable. I think what Rockets fans, I can't speak for all of them, but I think what most Rockets fans want is some accountability. If a player is going to make a mistake, they should be taught not to make that mistake again and be expected to not make that mistake again. Not consistently be shown to, this is not just this season, this is a problem from last season too, be the worst transition defense in the NBA.
And you're talking about the accountability, right? Eric Gordon has been echoing the sentiment the entire season, right? Talking about, well, we do this, we make the same mistakes, and then it boiled over to where you had Eric Gordon with his, famous,
There's no improvement.
No improvement comment, right? So it's something is off here with the Rockets, right? When you've got other players around the league, when you've got ex-players, when you've got current players, when you've got so many different people talking about what's wrong with the Rockets, including, the fans see it, national media is seeing it, national media talking heads, local media are commenting on it and seeing it. There is something off right now, and something desperately needs to be fixed. And, all the signs are heating up and kind of pointing towards, we've been talking about Stephen Silas for a while now, it feels like, but things are heating up when it comes to the front office as well. And that's what's going to lead us into our next clip from this John Wall tell-all interview, if you will, him talking about the Rockets' decision to sit him for the year and not play him at all, and the decision that led to Kevin Porter Jr. being the starting point guard for this Rockets team. We're going to get there and share our thoughts on that clip as well as the actual clip itself. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Say goodbye to last year's outdated, disorganized methods of managing your money and say hello to Rocket Money, the better way to hack your finances in 2023. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels all of your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Over 80% of people have subscriptions that they completely forgot about, right? I hate admitting it, but it's happened to me before, right? You just sign up for something, free trial, whatever, forget to cancel it. It hits your credit card statement. You're like, oh my God, completely forgot about this, right? It happens to the best of us, right? Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so that you can stop paying for the ones that you don't want. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions so easy with just the click of a button. Simply find the subscription that you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year. Stop throwing your money away, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. That's rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's go ahead and dive into, this is a bit of a longer clip from the John Wall interview, but it's him discussing the logistics behind what happened in him sitting out for an entire year while he was still a member of the Houston Rockets.
So even though they didn't want to, in my second year, they didn't want to play me at all. They were like, because they told me, like, at the end of the year, my first year, they was like, yo, we want to bring you back. We love the way you leading the team. You've been in leadership for the young guys. I'm like, I said, I don't about doing nothing. I said, if God put me in this place to help the young guys, that's what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm not here. He didn't put me here for y'all to try to tank and me be a player that can still play and just be wasting my talent. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
They're like, you going to start for us next year, whatever. And I would have been fine coming off the bench for them. You know what I mean? But I'm like, don't just give them a spot. Let them earn it.
Yeah.
So I go back to check on my condo a month before the season. They called. They're like, yo, come in the office. They're like, yo, this is coach talking. He's like, yo, how would you feel come off the bench? I said, for who? No offense, but who? I'm your best player last year. Like, this is what the GM want. This is what we want. I mean, we want you to play 10, 15 minutes a game. Sometimes don't play. I said, I'm not doing that. Either you're going to guarantee me some minutes,
right,
or I'm not. But I'm like, let him earn the spot.
Not facts.
And the coach, he was like, man, you don't deserve that. Like, you should be a starter. Like, you don't. Be like, this is what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, I'm not doing that. I said, I'll rehab, I'll work out every day, I'll stick around the team, come to meetings, fly with y'all, mentor the guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm doing. Then it got to the point that, like, don't come around. Like, they want me around. Like, I had to work out at 7 a.m. like I was a rookie.
They want you to come around at all?
Like, I had to work out before they got there. So, like, when they would come in to practice, I'd be at home by 10. Well, I'd be back home by 10:30, chilling all day. So
That's
I'm like,
nuts.
and my kids live in Miami. I'm like, man, I can't be here. Because now I'm like, I'm bored as shit.
Yeah.
From 10:30 all day, I'm just chilling to the game.
Right.
The game at 7, I get there at 6:59. I ain't playing. I already done worked out for the day. You know what I mean? So I'm in a whole nother place. I'm like, I'm going out like a motherfucker. I'm like, bro, this is boring as hell. I'm wasting money for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I said, let me go back to Miami. Get on a regular schedule, spend time with my kids every day. Till I get traded. I didn't get traded, and I got a buyout, and I signed here. That's how it all went. That's how crazy it was, though.
That's crazy.
All right. Well, that's even more to unpack than from our first clip. First thing that jumps out at you from that clip, Alykhan.
The comment that he made about Steven saying that it's not like he basically saying that you shouldn't have to go through this.
Yeah, Steven Silas didn't agree with the idea that John Wall should be asked to come off the bench. And, you know, Wall's, you know, we're paraphrasing here, but Wall's wording, right, was, you know, Silas telling him, this is what they want, right? This is what they want. And that lends some credence to the discussion, the rumors, the speculation that we've had on, you know, Stone and the front office's role in, you know, dictating what is happening for this organization, right? Who's going to play, what lineups are going to be run, right? So they very clearly wanted Kevin Porter Jr. in that starting point guard spot, so much so that they were just like, no, like, Kevin's going to be your starting point guard, and if John wants to come off the bench behind him, cool, he can do that. But otherwise, and John, understandably, was like, screw that. I'm John Wall, right? Like, I want it, like, and he said at the very beginning, he was like, I want a chance to at least earn your spot, right? And that goes back to the first segment, talking about the way that they play, right? This under, like, where it's just, stuff is just given to these guys, where there is no level of, like, accountability or earning your keep or whatever. It's just like, no, like, Kevin and Jalen are just going to get to do what they want. And that, I feel like that's not a great culture. That's not establishing a culture that is a winning culture or a winning identity or whatever. This is not a great situation, Alykhan.
I want to say something. I'm not necessarily defending the front office or the coaching staff here, but I completely get wanting to send John Wall home. Jackson,
so I'm assuming you mean from the standpoint of if John Wall, and because I think this was probably around the time that we were hearing like the whole John Wall's ramping up and getting ready to play. And I mean, if you've got a guy who is this disgruntled and upset that he's not playing,
you don't want them around the team.
And he wasn't given a fair shot to like earn his starting spot, and he is easily the most talented player on the team. Like, obviously, right? It
made sense.
You don't want a negative influence around the guys, and it does. Maybe it feels like a certain way where he was we don't know that he was becoming a negative influence, and I doubt we'll ever find out he was becoming a negative influence.
I don't think you're saying that he will be a negative influence. I think it just means that whenever you knew Wall was not happy with the opportunity that he was being given, or lack of an opportunity being given, at that point, it just doesn't. You're clearly trying to go all in on your young guards. It just didn't make sense. I completely understand that from a front office perspective that they're looking at things from a not just that season, but hey, we need to figure out if this Kevin Porter Jr. Jalen Green combination is going to work. That makes total sense. What I'm just concerned about is just understanding that the guy he still had 2 years left on his contract when that discussion was being had. Were you going to essentially sit him for 2 years?
It very much felt, to me, it always felt like, okay, if you're going to sit him for the first year, Maybe you'll luck into a trade. Maybe somebody will get really desperate, right? Somebody comes and breaks the John Wall emergency glass and floats the Rockets another first-round pick for, to absorb the contract or whatever. To me, it was always, okay, they're going to eat the 1 year and then they're going to do a buyout for the second year. And that's ultimately what it became, right? Is they ate the 1 year, they did the buyout for the second year. And John, Wall is now playing for the Clippers, and that's that's his new situation now. But I mean, to look at that, and then he also had the comment offhand, like earlier on, about talking about trying to tank, and I don't know if we should read too much into that comment, the phrasing of that comment specifically. I feel like people are going to run wild with it. The Rockets are trying to tank.
Well, no, I think you have to understand that specific season too, Jackson. He had 30 players play for them. I mean, that was just not a normal season. A lot of injuries, a lot of issues with the roster.
The COVID season.
I can't come out and say that John's absolutely right, but I can't say he's absolutely wrong. But I think the context matters. They had 30 guys play for them that season, right?
He also, you didn't hear it in that clip, unfortunately, because it was elsewhere in a slightly different clip. There's a little bit more of the interview available if you want to go watch the full thing. But at one point, when he's talking about the COVID season, he goes, "We had Justin Patton starting for us." Like he's like listing off a 5-man lineup of guys. It's like Justin Patton, David Nwaba. Like he's like listing all these guys. So poor Justin Patton's out here catching strays. He played 2 games for the Rockets.
Justin Patton right now is one of the best big men in Europe. By the way, I just want to say that.
But Justin Patton comes along on Twitter and he quote tweets the video and he goes, "I thought we were cool, John Wall." Adds him on Twitter. That's hilarious. This whole situation is so weird, man.
I wanna just say something. I want to reference something. So my brother Kelly Eco had an article that he did. It was a Q&A with Rafael Stone back in January of 2022. And I'm going to say 2 question and answers that he had with Rafael Stone. And I think it's interesting to go back and look at it. So Kelly asked him, "I recall at the beginning of the season," so that's the start of the 21-22 season, "you and John Wall addressed the media about his situation. How is that relationship now? He clearly wants to play, but you guys are still moving forward." Rafael Stone said, quote, "I love John. We have a great relationship. We speak frequently. I spoke to him the other day. He's really smart. Our conversations are always intelligent. They're always respectful. He's both ways. I respect him immensely, and it feels like it's reciprocated. I really like John. We're going to be friends long after basketball," unquote. Kelly asked him, but does he understand what his realistic outcome is right now? Things tend to pick up around this time, but he has to know how difficult finding a solution might be. Rafael Stone's answer, quote, "John's a pro. He gets every aspect of everything. I don't need to explain it to him. He knows. You know John. John knows. But we speak about everything. Nothing's off limits. So yeah, lines of communication between myself and John remain really good," unquote. Just very interesting to go back to an interview that Kelly did with Rafael Stone back on January 27, 2022. So not even a year ago, right? And just think about the differences, in tone that John's experiencing now versus what Rafael spoke about back then. And then also just John's comments now. So just really interesting. I think one additional point I want to make as we keep going, Jackson, is that,
well, I'll tell you what, I want to do our final takeaways from this because I want to wrap this thing up in our third segment here.
Okay.
We'll do that in just one moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis this season. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, basketball, NFL playoffs, MLB right around the corner. You name it, they've got you covered over at BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get all of your sports betting info. Right now, you can head over to BetOnline to take a look at who the odds-on favorites are to win the NBA title this season. The Boston Celtics leading the way at plus 400. Right after them, got the Milwaukee Bucks at plus 700, the Brooklyn Nets at plus 800, the Golden State Warriors also at plus 800, and then rounding out the top 5, you have the Denver Nuggets at plus 900. So for all those odds and more, be sure to visit over at betonline.net to learn about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Final takeaways from this John Wall interview discussing his unpleasant time with the Houston Rockets.
Trash.
That's
Trash.
That's gonna be my new favorite drop on this soundboard is John Wall saying trash.
Trash.
But Alykhan, hit me with one of your overarching takeaways from this interview, from what we heard and what we learned about John Wall's situation.
So I have a couple things in mind. First is, usually
I asked you for one, not two, so don't get greedy. You can do one. No.
Okay. I'll do one, and then if I have one more, is it okay, Jackson, if I share after you?
I guess that is acceptable. No, okay. Go for it.
The Rockets have been trying to promote out to externally to players, to other teams, that they know how to treat their players right. Whether it was James Harden working with him, whether it was DeMarcus Cousins, whether it was John Wall, and now Eric Gordon. They're trying to push out a narrative, or
you listed two guys that are very much not happy with their situation is the problem. Like, clearly Wall is unhappy and bugged by how the organization
Wall now,
treated.
but when he was bought out and going through the whole thing, there was, you could see it. I mean, if we go back in time right now, we're talking today. On this day, we're recording the podcast. Obviously, John Wall's comments are going to kind of permeate and take away some steam of what I'm saying, but think about it from the context of just even last year. The Rockets are trying to promote a narrative that they are a player-friendly organization. They will work with their players to make sure that everything they want, up to par. They're growing, they're developing. It's a rebuild, but they're going to work with those veteran players to get them where they want to go. Oladipo, all those guys, right? Like they had a good
PJ Tucker
and PJ Tucker. They were trying to promote that out, externally. This John Wall thing, it's one player. But, it's going to raise some eyebrows. Players talk. It's a very small circle in the NBA. And to me, that is something that I'm a little concerned about. I know it's just, like I said, it's one player, but players do talk. And my big takeaway is, does this change the narrative that the Rockets were, really trying hard to build, that they are willing to work with players and make sure they're doing everything right by the players?
I think they're gonna take a hit for the John Wall situation for this interview for sure. I think they're also probably gonna take a hit for Eric Gordon, right? If Eric Gordon is unhappy, if he's frustrated about his situation, the lack of clarity with his future, right? Trying to figure out what's gonna happen to him, right? He's on an expiring deal. Then what if he, again, you said NBA is small circle, right? These guys talk, right? They talk around the league. They discuss, they talk about things. If Eric is potentially telling guys, hey, dude, Houston is like that, that's not good for this organization if he is frustrated by his position, right? Because either, again, they aren't dealing him to a contender, or they won't get him a contract extension so that he has a little bit of clarity and understands where his standing is within the organization. So now you couple that with the John Wall stuff, like it's potentially not looking good here. When I look at this whole situation, I think it's very strange that so much of this is all because of you trace it all back to one guy. And it's unfortunate because I feel like he does get an unfair amount of criticism now, especially and throughout this season, but you trace it all back to Kevin Porter Jr. is the problem, because the Rockets got KPJ for nothing from the Cavaliers, right? Got him for free because no other team in the association wanted him. If the Rockets didn't pick him up, he was going to be out of the league. And the Rockets were infatuated with his ability, his talent, all this. Brought him in, let him cook in the G League for a little bit, brought him up to the team. And they saw something there with him, right? And they wanted to make him the point guard. But they did so at the expense of a veteran guard who very much could have been for at least, John Wall could still be playing in Houston today, right now, if they hadn't gone all weird with icing him for a year and not wanting to, have his final option picked up, like all that, and buying him out instead. John Wall could be playing basketball right now, present day, for the Houston Rockets. And I think there's a really valid argument to be made that this Rockets team, the young core, the development, they would look a lot better if John Wall was actually the one running the show and not the experiment with Kevin Porter Jr. at the point guard spot. So not only, I think we look at the KPJ situation as, oh, the Rockets got him for free. No, there are very much a lot of costs associated with experimenting with KPJ at the point guard spot. You have likely slowed down some of the development of some of the other guys on the roster because trying to develop Kevin at point guard is, at times, I think it's actively slowed down and inhibited the development of Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr. this season. Because you don't have a legitimate veteran point guard. You don't have a guy who understands that position through and through, helping to set the table for some of these guys, getting these guys involved, getting them easier looks. And then not only that, you have the cost associated of the $44 million, whatever John Wall was being paid that one year that he sat out and didn't play at all. You effectively just, that cost is a KPJ cost. You paid a player to sit out. And so how do you justify that, right? As an organization, how are you justifying that to ownership? Hey, we're going to let this guy sit and not do anything. We don't want him to play at all. He's getting paid a lot of money. Because we think this kid has a ton of potential moving forward. And at that point, if you're really selling KPJ as like the potential, future, like, oh my God, he's the new hotness, right? Like, you got to go with this kid. And then he starts to maybe not pan out. Maybe there's a little bit of like the wagon has been hitched to where it's like, now they need KPJ to pan out or it won't look good internally, right? Now they need KPJ to work because otherwise you sold ownership, you sold the organization on this idea of, oh, this kid's got all this talent and he should be the point guard, right? We should sit John Wall. We should send him home. Like, don't keep him anywhere near the organization. And on top of all that, you have Steven Silas, who from the sounds of it did not enjoy that decision, at least per John Wall. Steven Silas was not on board with that idea and probably would have enjoyed having a veteran point guard out there on the floor to kind of help run the show a little bit. I don't know, man. It's a lot. It's a lot going on with these comments, and it does not look good.
You'd say it's on Kevin Porter Jr. I still go back to what I said in the first segment. I think,
but it's not on KPJ himself. It's on the decision to put KPJ to prioritize him this way. Like,
I will push back, Jackson, a little bit.
Sure.
What else would you do in that situation? You did not have a player that was like, he has a good chance of developing into something. Like, how do I describe it? You don't have a prized piece, an asset that had a chance to grow. And when you got Kevin Porter Jr. with his talent that we saw early on in Cleveland, that was like, oh man.
Well,
Steven Silas get to him. Let's see what could happen. I think in the moment though,
here's the pushback on it. KPJ looked good next to John Wall in the half season that they played together because he's not really a point guard, right? And so you could have just played John Wall. Here's the argument. Maybe you don't draft Jalen Green because you already have a potential franchise 2-guard at home in KPJ, right? Like, maybe that shouldn't have been the decision with the number 2 overall pick. I'm not sitting here saying like this is anti-Jalen Green. Like, I'm glad the Rockets have Jalen Green, but some of these decisions are confusing, right? Because,
well, I mean, they chose Jalen Green off of the ceiling aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But even then, like, you could have maybe theoretically run John Wall, Jalen Green, and Kevin Porter Jr. I don't know. Like, there's variations of what could have happened.
No, I get what you're trying to say. No, for sure. I think ultimately this is the second point I wanted to make. All of this, everything Wall said, I think the biggest takeaway is, besides the whole conversation with Silas and everything, is what he said about the development of the young players and his comments to them, and that he was supposed to be a mentor. And if a veteran player who's an ideal veteran player for this team in terms of the position to get who was their best player that previous season, if he is saying these things about development, you can't just put it in one year out the other. Some of it has to ring true, and that is one of the biggest concerns for me as well. Point blank.
Yeah, I mean, it matches the eye test is the problem. Right? I don't know of another organization, another situation around the NBA that gets as much outward criticism about how things are going as the Rockets do, right? Like I don't see or hear about players commenting on the Orlando Magic rebuilding process and what they're doing and if things are going sideways over there. I don't hear anything about the Detroit Pistons. I don't hear anything about Charlotte, who's had a completely topsy-turvy season.
Very valid
LaMelo.
points. Very valid points.
But you hear a lot of chatter from active players, from national media talking heads, from the local media, from fans. You hear a lot of chatter about the Houston Rockets, and there's something off right now. There's something not right, and I don't think the blame is just all in one area, right? I don't think it's just the players aren't developing enough or they're not executing. I think there's a lot of blame to go around right now. But the $1 million question is, how do you resolve this, right? How do you get the organization? I don't think you can look at this and say this is a Steven Silas issue, Rafael Stone issue, front office issue, players issue. Like you said, everybody has to take accountability. You have to be able to sit back and reflect what you can do to improve, evaluate the process that you're going through right now. How do you make sure that you're seeing growth, right? I mean, if you look back at quotes, Rafael Stone has always talked about not grow just individually, but as a team. That's important to them. Well, how do you get back to that if that's not occurring right now, right? One thing I want to say that kind of just adds some happiness or some positivity. Hey, Houston fans, you have Alperen Sengun.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy
to have Alperen Sengun. I mean, look, man, he's playing very well. I don't know what
he's a shining star in these dark times.
I don't know what his ceiling is. I'll be very honest with you. I do not know what his ceiling is, but his floor right now is very good, and I'm excited to watch him play. I put out a film study out on him earlier today, how they're utilizing him and Jalen Green together out of Horns. Steven Silas is actually showing some variations offensively to have them both play well alongside each other. So yes, this John Wall interview happened. It's not something you want to hear. We all want to talk about it. But you know what else? We have Alperen Sengun playing well, right? You have that to watch. And you have a guy like Jalen Green who's actually playing well next to Alp when they're together. And let's see if Kevin Porter Jr., somebody they've invested in, who's going to be a Rocket for at least the next 2 seasons, can he play when he comes back and he's healthy alongside Alp and Jalen? Can they continue to do the coaching staff what they've been trying to do with Alp, let him initiate and get Jalen and KPJ going the way they've gone and Eric going as well the last 2 games with free throws and assists, season highs for Eric. So it remains to be seen. I think there's some positivity at the end of this tunnel that we have a chance to look forward to over these next few games.
Yeah, and we will most definitely be talking about Alperen Sengun and some of the ways that Steven Silas is utilizing him now over this most recent stretch of games in our next episode, assuming we don't get dropped with some more bombshell Rockets news that is must talk about stuff. Maybe Tracy McGrady's going to roll up and do a tell-all interview next week. Who knows? We'll keep tabs on all of that. But as always, we appreciate you for checking out the show. Alykhan, you know the drill. Let everybody know where they can track you down at.
Jackson, you're right. I feel like these last few episodes we've gone away from Telestration Tuesdays because we've had bomb and just bomb drops come in before we start recording, right? But looking forward to getting back and talking to you guys about Sengun here next week. Film studies have been coming out. Follow me on TikTok and Twitter at Rockets_insider. A lot of really good things coming. Thank you so much for following along.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. What are your thoughts on the John Wall interview? What are your thoughts on what he had to say about the Houston Rockets organization? Let me know in the YouTube comments. I read each and every one of those every single day. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.